Hello YouTube and welcome to the Armorer yet again. Today we're going to be taking a look at a mathematically correct Dash IO. It's a deck that I brought to a local ProQuest and ended up splitting the finals and ended up being in top 4 on the other one. The list I played for those events was a little different, but after the events, me and a friend of mine went into the laboratory and we were calculating percentages for quite some time in order to try and figure out the best ratios for the deck. And I'm going to try and explain some of those and just go through how the deck plays and what the deck wants to play. So starting off with the equipment, we obviously have Symbiosis Shot, Adaptive Plating, Crown of Providence, and Heavy Industry Gear Shift, and Teku Foundry Heart. All of these are very important because they allow you to block for the maximum amount of the deck can achieve, and that is very important because you really want to be able to keep your hand for a very massive turn, and this deck can pull extremely massive turns. Teku Foundry Heart and Gear Shift are also very important because they allow you to just banish cards from the top of your deck without using cards from your hand, and that's very important because once again this deck wants to utilize Dash IO's ability to play items from the top of your deck as much as possible. Like, you won't be doing this every turn, and these cards allow you to just cycle through your deck faster and find whatever you need, with a better chance. Speaking of items, the amount of items we're running in this deck is 16, and 16 is the correct amount of items. If we're running 15 items, and we were calculating between 15 and 17 items, and 16 items optimizes for the highest likelihood of hitting an item from the top of the deck while we have 1 or 0 items in hand, while still minimizing as much as possible the chances of us drawing 2 or more items in hand. The optimization between those numbers, like 15, 17, 16, are very, very little. It's kind of close to a percentage. So in about like 100 games, you're going to win 1 game due to those optimizations. But I'm assuming people will play more than 100 games when they pick up the deck. So the items that I have chosen are Cerebellum Processor, obviously, the card that effectively makes the deck, and it's the centerpiece of the deck. You want to find Cerebellum and as many Cerebellums as possible, as fast as possible, and then you want to start abusing them by generating action points, be it by playing items at instant speed with Crank from the top of your deck, or things like High Octane or your boots. Next, Teku Core. 2 free resources is just amazing. I'm playing 8 grenades and 2 backup protocols. I think that Cerebellum Core and 6 grenades is kind of the stock standard, and then I decided to split between 2 backup protocols and 2 blue grenades, just so I can keep a sort of equal split between blue and red items, because sometimes you will need to draw blue cards off of Cerebellum, and I kind of want to be able to draw blue items as well. Next, we have 3 Spark of Genius. It's a card that searches for your Cerebellum, so you absolutely need that. And we have 3 High Octanes, the card that allows you to abuse the Cerebellums as much as possible. And the rest of the deck is basically the cheapest and most valuable boost cards you can find. And all that being topped off by a maximum velocity. Activating maximum velocity in this deck is very easy, and this deck is so insane that you can actually play like 2 maximum velocities in a turn, and that can ruin people. So yeah, we are playing 0 to 60. It's just 0 for 4. We're playing Pulse Wave Harpoon. Pulse Wave Harpoon is kind of like Mechanologist only sort of disruption available in the class. In this deck, it is even harder than usual to pull it off, because a lot of times, especially in your big turns with high octanes, you kind of want to actually use your cerebellums in between your boosts in order to find and draw yourself more specific cards, be it like blues or reds or things like Spark of Genius from the top of your deck, in order to play out and continue pumping. So all of that is going to break the chain and make your harpoons worse, but at the end of the day it is still a 1 for 4, as is like the majority of the deck. We have Outpace that says can be blocked by equipment, and Fender Bender that says gets plus X, where X is the number of equipment defending it. Those cards are amazing in like end games against classes and heroes that are trying to block you out, because you just say no. I had a game against Enigma that the Enigma did not manage to actually utilize her equipment, because she was holding back her equipment for as much as possible, as you normally do playing Flesh and Blood. But then I had a turn with bunch of boosts, finishing with like triple outpace or something like this, just killing her on the spot. And Fender Bender effectively achieves the same, which is why I think these are kind of like your best 1 for 4s you can play in the deck. Your best 1 for 4 red cards. Then we have Fast and Furious, which is a 0 for 4 a lot of the times, and it can also give you more counters on your cerebellum. So that is effectively draw a card in a lot of situations. And last but not least, in a way, is Zipper Hit. And Zipper Hit, I really wanted to talk about yellow Zipper Hit. We ended up with like this heuristic in a way, where the benefit, the small benefit of other 1 for 4 red cards with like a non-hit, which is something like Dive Through Data, which is Opt, or the Medics card that allows you to drop an item from your hand. We decided that those are very rarely better than having the option of having a yellow card in your hand to actually allow you to start your turn, because at the end of the day we are once again optimizing the deck on the blue side for like 1 card, for like 1 blue in your hand if possible, which means that you will end up in situations where you have no blues, and usually that's fine, because you also have things like Teku Core on the field that are going to just give you resources, right? Because like Teku Core gives you 2 resources, you can then transform those 2 resources into effectively 3 resources with something like Teku Founder Heart. So you're just getting resources out of nowhere, especially if you have something like Cerebellum on the field that can just draw you into your blue. But in a lot of these situations, a yellow card is sufficient enough, because a yellow card is going to allow you to play any of your 1 for 4s, and then have enough resources in order to activate your Foundry card, transforming it into 2 more resources and allowing you to continue playing while digging through your deck and giving you more chances for the Cerebellum to actually find something. So that's why we decided that effectively the next best 1 for 4 card in Mechanologist is just yellow Zipper Hit. And kind of the most, I was going to say outrageous, but it's not outrageous. It's like the most different in a way. Card is Heist. And Heist, I just like Heist. I cannot very much defend it like mathematically or logically as like the rest of the choices inside of the deck. It's just that there are situations where Heist hitting is just going to give you exponentially a lot more value, right? Because there are situations where you have Cerebellum on the field with any banished cranked item, and you present your opponent with a Heist, and if your opponent does not block the Heist, you will be getting crank additional action point, meaning that you just get an additional draw instantly off the Cerebellum, and you just continue playing. And you get a lot of value, right? And that is in like the most barest of situations. Like obviously, Heist can even get you a Cerebellum that you maybe your opponent banished, or maybe you had to banish yourself, or whatever. So yeah. In practice, in my experience from the games I played on the ProQuest, it basically never hit my opponent because a lot of decks have quite a big fridges right now, and they don't really have something to use their fridge on because we don't really have on hit effects. I guess we kind of have grenades, but like a lot of the times the grenades are going to be as attack reactions, so your opponent is not going to see them. Versus decks that are going to try to block us out, maybe we'll have more grenades on the field, kind of wasting their equipment to try and block the grenades, and then we can come in with Heist. But that didn't really ever line up. The best situation for Heist was against an Enigma that went through all of her cards and equipment on a very early turn in order to try and stop Heist from resolving at the end of my chain, which meant that she basically had no access to free chi because she had to just destroy her traverse the universe in order to stop the heist, and that was very beneficial, but yeah, I can't really back it up with more data. And talking about data, we have dive through data as like our filler in a way in order to make a clean 60, because opt one is kind of an okay effect, right? It can just boost the consistency of our deck even more, especially in those Cerebellum turns. And yeah, next, I guess last we move to the blues. We also were calculating the differences between 19 and 20, 17, 16, 18 blues, right? We were all of these. And once again, optimizing for the least amount of chance to draw 3 and 4 blues and the most amount of chance of drawing 1 blue a hand. And 18 is the best number. It optimizes for those chances the best. And once again, the net percentage gain we have with like 18 over the other numbers is around like 1 game per 100. So I wouldn't blame you at the end of the day if you just go by feels whenever you're building your deck, but the blues that we chose, we obviously have Teku Core, Cerebellum 0 to 60 and Zipper Hit because those are must plays in the deck and also like the best rate for cost in the cards. Then we have Outpace because even in the late game, especially when people are used to be holding back their equipment for as late as possible, an Outpace even in those situations is going to be backbreaking. And the 2 blue grenades that we talked about. And finally, I have 1 blue T-bone. The blue T-bone is a filler. In a situation like this, you can decide that maybe you want to try and play like 17 items instead of 16, and maybe just move to an additional grenade, or maybe you want to explore blue protocol, which I do not like at all because I don't think the deck struggles for resources almost at all. So my decision was basically one of T-Bone because it's a zero cost boost, which is something that sometimes you actually need, right? You'll be in situations where you have 2 resources left over and you have maximum velocity and you need your cerebellum to find you something that you can actually boost and play the velocity, and in those situations you actually have T-Bone to achieve that. Maybe there are cards that are attacking for more, but I like T-Bone because at the very least, seeing how many people have fridges in like 2 blocks in like every spot, T-Bone can kind of, especially the blue one, can kind of like trade positively by forcing your opponent to waste a 2 block on it. So that's basically the reasoning. Next, moving to the sideboard. The sideboard for Dash.io is quite robust. This is not a sideboard, an actual sideboard or a sideboard guide. This is just a bunch of cards that I think you can play in the sideboard. I think Achilles Accelerator together with Visitonic Model I are kind of a must in order to play those versus Kano and play the Achilles versus Rune Blades basically. Balance of Justice is very good against the Brutes, it's also very good against Aurora, I think. And Goliath Gauntlet is very good against Kano again because armor from the adaptive plating does almost nothing, and you can experiment with it into other matchups. My experience against Enigma, for example, has been that Enigma is on the back foot trying to block me out for the majority of the game, and she was not really swinging back at me, and even when she was, I would kind of have like enough defense in order to block out whatever disruption she throws. So maybe something like Goliath Gauntlet can be useful in those matchups as well, and paired up with Heist to just like give you exponential value in those games where people just try to block you out. In the games where people just try to block you out, playing a few Teku Pounders is also very nice because you can sometimes take setup turn that they may not even utilize that well, especially if you've attacked them a few times first, because their first reaction will always be to just like block out however much damage they can. So you may not even get punished by just finishing on a tackle pounder, and you also have an additional chance of just opening a tackle pounder in your hand, like starting first. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe play like 2 or 3 of these. Depends on how you feel. Then we have a whole bunch of like one-cost items that you can play for like different occasions. We have Signal Jammer that can stop things like Kano, maybe some of the Rune Blades, definitely things like Azalea. We have Dissolution Sphere, which is not one cost item, but it also allows you to effectively stop Viscerai's best turns. So if you're scared of a Viscera or something like this, just having the one Dissolution Sphere in your deck, allowing you to sometimes go for attack, drop Dissolution Sphere, especially when they've allowed you to deal like 8 damage for 3 because they're for free, because they're holding a hand of like Mordred Tide and something, and you just Dissolution Sphere them and they just like lose, right? Like if they had Mordred Tide and like Revo in Runeblood or something like this in the hand, they are extremely punished by a card like this. But you know, this is like a very kind of Christmas land scenario. Then we have something like TikTok Clock, which allows you to destroy items, which is very good in the mirror. But seeing how the metagame was shaped in week 3 and week 4, which is when the deck was actually legal to play, it doesn't seem like the deck is going to be as popular as people predicted, so the mirror may not be a problem. I have Plasma mainline here, where the idea, I guess, is you set up this early and then it's just going to pump your items later down the line. But I think that this is just a pipe dream type of a card, and it will not be nearly as effective in practice. And I never bought it in, and it's just something that I saw people playing, but the theory doesn't make sense to me. We have Dissolving Shield that I also never ended up playing, but the theory is that against some decks like Azalea and I guess Nu and so on, just like basically disruption type of decks, you can use Dissolving Shield in order to stack some defenses and prevent them from disrupting you on your big turns, together with your armor pieces. I'm not sure how well this works in practice because you cannot include way too many of these, and you have to time them almost perfectly, right? Like you need to have like one or two of these against your opponent's big turn, and then you need to have a big turn on your own, and at the same time, in my games against Azalea, it has felt completely fine, right? Unless they chain Red in the ledgers into me, it feels like my turns are just way stronger, way bigger than hers. So I just run over her. That's how it felt. Then we have Convection Amplifier, which is a card that I actually liked a lot. It's a zero cost item that does not have Crank, it doesn't have Go Again as well, but it says enter with 2 Steam counters, and then as an action you can remove a Steam counter, and the next stack card you play this turn gains Dominate. You don't have to boost, you just have to play it. And it has Go Again, so it allows you to go through something like a maximum velocity at the end of the chain if your opponent still holds like a bunch of cards in hand. And it also pairs very well with things like Heist, making them even harder to block. Especially if your opponent used up their armor pieces earlier in the game to try and stop some of the grenades. And also it pairs up well with the grenades because it makes your grenades easier to hit. Then I have one dive through data. Dive through data here is just to kind of talk about the possibility of having your extra deck, instead of being a bunch of items that you can side in for particular matchups, because you can open with them in your starting hands, or in like setup turns, or you can even surge them with things like Spark of Genius. Instead of that, it can be correct to just fill your inventory with bunch more 1/4 red cards and maybe some blue cards in order to fit the ratios of a bigger deck, right? Something like a 70 card or like 68 or something like this, in order to basically give you an additional turn or two into those more defensive decks that are trying to fatigue you out. Then I have one Hyper Scrapper, which if you want to play this, and if you want to conserve space, I guess you can also play one instead of your T-Bone here. But I just felt like T-Bone is like overall more useful in a higher percentage of the games compared to Hyper Scrapper. But the theory behind Hyper Scrapper is that if this remains in your deck during the final turns of a game, where you're maybe run out of deck and your opponent's on very low amount of life, you can just pitch 3 blues into Hyper Scrapper, banishing 9 items from your graveyard, pumping it to 11, and hopefully having a Convection Amplifier on the field beforehand, effectively attacking your opponent for 11 Dominate with your last hand, kind of securing you the win. I tried that, And in practice, a lot of the decks that tried to block me out or trade with me were just swamped in like double or triple maximum velocity or like back-to-back maximum velocities and so on. So this card was never relevant. And also, you kind of need to constantly be drawing it, which is like very hard to ensure, especially in a deck like this, because a lot of times you just see it on top of your deck and you just have to boost it away because you need to actually apply pressure, and you can't just slow down your game just for like this end gameplay. And finally, a card that seemed very memey at the start, but I think should actually be explored a lot more is System Reset. I think that there's a possibility where your gameplay into decks like Florian that are trying to just fatigue you out and constantly block and have like above rate blocks and so on, maybe the play against them is to try and set up hands where you can play System Reset. You obviously have to dodge something like Warmongers, but just imagine a turn where you have like two Cerebellums on the field already with High Octane in your hand, and you end up drawing a System Reset, be it of the High Octane or of the two Cerebellums. And you know, if you have like three boosting cards in your hand with High Octane, with Foundry Heart, you're going to go through like 5 or 6 cards, which increases your chances of finding a System Reset. And the moment you find System Reset, you'll be able to just sink 2 resources, which you most likely have in a moment like this, in order to just reset your Cerebellums, gain 2 action points back again, gain effectively 4 damage for your Symbiosis Shot as well, and then you'll be able to, with like those 3 action points, you'll be able to continue drawing off the Cerebellums. Continue drawing off the Cerebellums means that you will continue digging deeper into your deck. You'll be able to find things like Spark of Genius in order to find a third Cerebellum, and that may also lead to you finding a second System Reset in this combo hand. And that's kind of the snowball I'm talking about, right? Because if you manage to just snowball a System Reset into your System Reset in the same turn off of like 2 or 3 Cerebellums, you end up with a lot of action points and a lot of draws and a lot of damage on your Symbiosis Shot. And that may be kind of like the tipping point turn that you're looking to kill decks like Florian that are trying to fatigue you out, right? Because like they won't be able to fatigue you out if you make basically an infinite turn where you deal like 70 damage to them, right? So yeah, that's why I think it's worth exploring. In the maybe tier, I have Twin Drive. I see a bunch of people are playing it, but I feel like it is extremely useless. I do not like it at all. I think that 245 is just a bad rate, especially in this deck. And I don't think that you gain very much off of boosting twice. Boosting twice can kind of give you like 2 action points immediately in a high octane turn, but that means that you need to draw High Octane with this card, and then you need to absolutely have a blue in order to play them one after the other. And even in a situation like that, you still need to draw into like another blue or something in order to be able to generate resources off of your armor piece. It just gets a lot. It just gets more and more complicated. Playing Red T-Bones, I feel like it's kind of useless because right now the majority of decks have blade, not blade break equipment, but battle worn equipment, so they do not really care if you make them block, especially in a deck that has like 0 on hit effects. That link is a cool idea, right? Because it's even more opt, but I think just 0 for 3 boost is like extremely horrible stats because it's like very easy to block and it just digs you deeper into your deck. And it's probably not hitting, right? Like unless you're in an aggro mirror, and in that case, once again, just like play a 1 for 4, right? And talking about 4 damage cards, Scoop Up or Soup Up, excuse me. Soup Up is something that I was very excited to play in a deck like Dash.io because I assume that an item I control is going to be destroyed very often, meaning that I will be able to play this as simply as a 0 for 4 go again, and it's not going to boost me away of my deck, which is going to be pretty nice because I'm not going to fatigue as easily, and also sometimes it will also be able to block 4 by destroying an item that is already used up and is going to die anyway during my turn, allowing me to block important things like Snatch with a singular card. Unfortunately, the reality of this is that you don't get your items to do any of those things nearly as often as you'd like in order for you to be comfortably playing triple Soup Up. And then the next problem is that so much of this deck is reliant on you boosting, and by so much I mean literally the entirety of it, that running cards that do not boost is very detrimental to the strategy. Especially when they're in red and you cannot just pitch them away. That's why Hyper Scrapper is kind of okay, but even then, I would much rather have a T-Bone in the blue slot in the 60 instead of Hyper Scrapper, simply because once again there are these situations where you just need one additional 0 cost boost, and that's going to allow you to explode with like an additional 10 damage off the top, and especially if it's a situation where you have grenades, it's way more than 10, and those things did happen quite a lot in my PQ. And I also run that during day 1, and like by game 2 I was like so disappointed by that card, and I basically boarded it out for the rest of the day. So yeah, that's mathematically correct Dash.io. Hope you like it and hope it helps you succeed with the deck. Bye bye.